Grounds crew prepares the field here at White House Field. It is almost time for Championship Series baseball. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the pregame show as the Harwich Mariners will be playing host here to the Cotuit Kettlers in Game 1 of the CCBL Final. And Colin, this should be a highly anticipated matchup between two of the best teams in the Cape Cod Baseball League. Let's really quickly recap how these teams got here. For the Harwich Mariners, it was two sweeps back-to-back, one against the one-seeded Chatham Anglers, another against the two-seeded YD Red Sox. On the other side, the Cotuit Cavaliers had a 2-1 win in series wins against the Wareham Gatemen and followed that up with a 2-0 sweep of the number one-seeded Falmouth Commodores. So two teams that have faced some good competition to get here, and Colin, who have done it in very different ways, haven't they?
Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, as you've got an unstoppable force in the Cotuit Cavaliers offense. 8 home runs in just 5 postseason games, including a 22-2 victory over the Wareham Gatemen. They actually haven't lost since that game, in which they completely dominated one of the better teams out in the West. And since then, they haven't really looked back. And then you look over at Harwich, you look at a pitching staff that has been so tough all season long, and they have really hit their marks here in the postseason. 4-0 with an even 1 ERA. That's just 1 run given up per game so far. They're a really tough team to get hits off of, but if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be this Cotuit Cavaliers team. It really should be a great series.
You bring up some of the stats, and I want to get deeper into that. If you've listened to our broadcast, you know we love stats. So let's get into what the matchups will look like really quickly. This is a Cotuit team. You mentioned some of it. I'm going to go all the way in here. That has hit 8 home runs, 40 RBIs. They have had 29 strikeouts as a hitting unit compared to 26 walks. They will face a Harwich pitching staff that this year in the postseason has a 1 ERA, as you mentioned. They've given up just 4 runs, including a no-hitter that they threw completely against Chatham, and then they've struck out 37 hitters compared to only 10 walks. On the flip side, this is a Harwich offense that has really struggled at times in certain patches. This is an offense that has just 3 home runs this year, 12 RBIs in the postseason, 42 strikeouts to only 10 walks, but they will be facing a pitching staff that has been good, not great. 2.65 ERA, 40 strikeouts to only 14 walks, and Colin, more importantly than all of that, this is a pitching staff that's stretched a little bit thin, as today they're going to be starting a reliever, a new guy in Harrison Cohen, who came here from the Hamptons League. He was with the West Hampton Aviators, where he had a 2.36 ERA. It's a lot of weight to throw on the shoulders of a guy who just arrived on the Cape less than a week ago, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's certainly a difference maker between the Harwich Mariners and Cotuit Cavaliers. When you look at the depth in the bullpen and in the starting rotation for these teams, Harwich really has both. They've had guys that haven't even pitched at all this postseason because they haven't really needed them. They've gotten great starts out of their starters, and then they've brought in a guy to go at least 3, sometimes 4 innings out of the bullpen, and that has just given so much rest for that bullpen that pretty much they can throw almost anybody going into today with the amount of guys that have had so much time off. You look at Cotuit, they did have to stretch that series to 3 games against Wareham, and I think that really took its toll on both the starting rotation and the bullpen. So Cohen's going to go out there. You know, we weren't really expecting a solid performance from Ryan Hare, the starter, yesterday for YD, and he came out and pitched 6 innings, giving up just 1 run, giving his team a chance to win this ball game right here at White House Field. So Cohen's job tonight simply just go maybe 3-4 strong innings and give his bullpen a little bit of relief.
Yep, Harrison Cohen will be on the bump for the Cotuit Cavaliers. For the Harwich Mariners, it will be a guy that we've seen a couple of times, but not in a starting capacity recently, and that is Connor Seckler. 2 of the last 3 games that he came into, he came in out of the bullpen and pitched just 1 inning. And he was supposed to do that again in the game against the Chatham Anglers, but Joe Boyle was pitching so well that they elected to leave him in. The one good thing about all of that, Colin, is Seckler and his incredible 3.0 ERA are going to be coming into today's game very, very well rested.
Yeah, I mean, imagine having a guy like that as your 3rd or 4th pitcher with a 3 ERA. I mean, you talk about the rest, but he certainly has been a guy that has been solid all season long. I mean, he'll give you a solid 5-6 innings and only give up, 2 to 3 earned runs. It's a great guy to have in the middle of your rotation. He actually started the game in which it was discontinued 12-0 earlier in the season against Cotuit, and he had pitched 3 1/3 shutout innings before the rain came down and washed away that game. So this is a guy who's had success against the Cotuit Cavaliers, but hasn't really mattered who he's been thrown up against. He has always delivered with solid starts. He hasn't given up more than 3 earned runs in any start he's made this season.
And let's really quickly talk about that game that got washed out, because while the stats don't count and while nothing from that game continues over onto paper, the games were played. The innings were played. And in the course of the last 21 innings, or 12 innings, I should say, that the Harwich Mariners have played against the Cotuit Cavaliers, they're outscoring Cotuit by a score of 21-1. That is a staggering number, and really, when you look at the way these two teams have played each other this season, it's been close. Let's go through the 4 games that they played. The first game was a game where the Harwich Mariners lost 5-7. Of course, a lot of guys not on the team from that game still today. But after that, really tight games. A 2-1 win for Harwich, a 2-0 win for Cotuit, and then the 12-0 win, or 12-0 in the early parts of the game that got washed out, then a 9-0 or 9-1 win for the Mariners. So we expect to see very gritty, very good pitching, despite the fact that both teams have had good offensive performances over the last few weeks. And Colin, if you had to give an approximate guess on what you think today's final score would be one way or the other, what are you thinking for a final prediction?
I'm honestly thinking somewhere to what we've seen in the YD Harwich series, where both those games were 5-1. I expect both teams to get their fair share of runs, but again, these are some solid pitching staffs that are out there. We're not really sure what to expect from Cohen, but if he's able to go 4 strong innings, get into that Cotuit bullpen, a bullpen that's been pretty consistent all season long. So runs could be tough to come by, but again, we saw the ball fly out of White House Field last night, a couple of home runs for Harwich, a team that has slowly but surely found their footing in the postseason at the plate. I expect each team to get their fair share of runs in this ballgame.
So let's really quickly talk scoring, because that's the other thing. We talked about who these teams played against. We did not go into the scores of those games. So for Harwich, they started their run off with a 1-0 win over Chatham and a combined no-hitter between their two pitchers, then a 4-2 win over Chatham in Game 2. Both YD games were 5-1 and 5-1. Here's where it gets interesting. On the Cotuit side, they went down to Wareham in Game 1, a game that they would eventually lose 7-8. They went down 6-0. Since then, they've had a run differential of plus 35. Now, if you're wondering, well, were those runs spread out over the course of several games? No, they were not.
Nope.
As the very next game, they won 22-2 over the Wareham Gatemen. That is the biggest blowout in Cape League postseason history, and it belongs to the Cotuit Kettlers. They didn't stop rolling after that with a 4-1 win over the Wareham Gatemen to close out the series, and then a 5-0 win followed it up with a 5-3 win over Falmouth. This is a team that, if you let them get rolling offensively, is one of the most dangerous in the CCBL. You alluded to that unstoppable force that's going to be coming at Harwich today in the lineup.
Yeah, and you look at that 22-2 victory against Wareham. Half their home runs in the postseason came just in that game. Mervis, Schmidt, Shavers, and Pasek all jumping the yard. Cody Pasek, a guy who didn't even have any home runs in the regular season, having some production. He'll be in the 9-hole today. And then you look at the RBI totals. Araj Anu, 5 RBIs, 3 different guys with 3 RBIs, Mervis, Pasek, Williams, and then 3 more guys with 2 RBIs. So that's 7 guys with multiple RBIs in a single game. That is just some unprecedented action coming from that lineup. So I expect them to be a very tough team to pitch against today. We'll see if Seckler tries to be a little bit careful earlier, or if he's going to go right after these Cotuit Kettler hitters.
Let's get into some history between these two teams, because this is a Harwich team looking for their 5th CCBL championship. They got one in 83, 87, 2008, and 2011. The interesting thing is, 2 of their 4 wins in the postseason have come against the Cotuit Kettlers. They beat them in 2008, and they beat them in 1983. Now they have another crack at them here in 2019. So there's that. There's also the fact that while Harwich has won their 4 championships this year, throughout the course of their history, this is a Cotuit team that is looking for their 17th CCBL title. They have been just one of the big dynasties in this league, and do you get the feeling they're a little bit more comfortable knowing that their team, while it's different guys every year, have been in this position before? Mike Roberts is going to be composed coaching today, and that could give Cotuit a very minor edge in this series.
I mean, looking at it from a historical perspective, this is pretty much the Yankees of the CCBL, with far and away the most championships right now in the entire CCBL. They got another opportunity today, and you mentioned manager Roberts. He has been around this game for a long, long time. His son Brian, former Baltimore Oriole that played in the major leagues, led the league in steals, I believe, back in 2007. So this is a guy who knows his stuff, and he has done a great job of getting this team ready for the playoffs. We know this was an inconsistent team earlier this season in the West. I would argue they were pretty much the Orleans Firebirds of the West, a team that would get hot at times. Then when the bats went cold, so did they. But they've been on fire in this postseason, and should be interesting to see if they can continue this production at the plate in this series. It's going to be a really tough task against a tough Harwich Mariners pitching staff.
Yeah, keep in mind, this is a Cotuit team. This is the 3 seed, so this is a 3-4 matchup in the championship. Should be a lot of fun. One last thing on the history, and then we'll step away, and of course we'll have the first pitch coming up here at about 6:30 p.m. But want to get into this. The last time these two teams met, back in 2008, the championship series, there were 3 guys that are now big major leaguers. Jason Kipnis played for the Cotuit Kettleers. The Harwich Mariners had DJ LeMahieu and Brandon Belt. My question to you, Colin, is this. If you had to pick 3 guys out of this series right here that are going to become big major leaguers, again, this is all purely speculation, but who do you think the 3 best guys on either of these two teams are to maybe have big major league careers down the road that we can look at the scorebook and go, we get to call a game for that guy?
Well, the first choice is obvious, and it's Nick Gonzalez for the Cotuit Kettlers. I mean, the guy won the regular season MVP for the Cape Cod Baseball League. I mean, he is just a phenomenal all-around player. Power, the ability to run, the ability to drive in runs, the glove. He is just a complete player for the Cotuit Kettlers. Looking at the Harwich Mariners, a guy certainly to look out for in the future, at least on the pitching staff, is Jacob Polish. I mean, one of the better pitchers this season. He's a guy that we definitely look out for. Doesn't appear that he might be pitching in this series due to the fact that he had just pitched recently. He might not be available for a game 3 or whatever, but regardless, he's a guy that you'll look at this roster and realize that he is someone that might have a very successful MLB career. And normally I would say Daniel Cabrera, because obviously we know that he is a highly touted prospect going into next year's draft, but obviously that's kind of cheating because Cabrera's no longer on the roster. So I'll look towards Cotuit. A guy who has really impressed me, especially during the playoffs, is a guy in the 6-hole, Parker Chavers. I mean, he is a guy that has had a lot of power that has kind of gone overlooked, I want to say. I mean, he's had power all season long. I believe he had 5 home runs, was able to drive in 18 runs in the regular season, and he has really hit his stride in the playoffs, driving in runs like he has. A great guy to have towards the middle to back of your lineup. I think he's a guy that you might be looking at in a few years and be like, wow, this guy really broke out this summer.
Fair enough. I'm going to throw one more name into the ring, and that is one of the sneakier picks, but Joe Boyle. I mean, the guy throws 101 miles an hour. He's got a slider to pair it with, and his only problem coming into this entire CCBL season was control. Well, it seems like the control has been just fine for him, as so far in the postseason, he has thrown 3 innings, 6 strikeouts, no hits, no walks, and those numbers replicate what we saw out of the back half of his regular season. So that would be my pick, but of course, it's all speculation. It'll be fun to see in 5 to 10 years where a lot of these guys are at. So that's going to do it for the pregame show, but stay tuned and catch us at 6:30 p.m. Regular stream, same channel right here on the Harwich Mariners YouTube network. First pitch of the CCBL Championship Series is right around the corner, right here on the Harwich Mariners YouTube network.